Hello everyone. In continuation with my previous lectures, that was environmental policies in India. Now, in my today's lecture, I would be particularly focusing on the various policies in India which has been initiated, which has been implemented for the environmental protection and preservation in India. Certain international, I had also mentioned earlier in the previous lecture, the International Covenant India was part of it, and what would be the other draft policies, or what measures can be further taken up in order to bring about this environmental policies effectively implemented all over the country, and which being adopted by various states. Environmental policy, it is an important component as it is the commitment of an organizations which related to laws, regulations, which would be like any other policies which runs in the country. And this generally includes air, water pollution, waste management, biodiversity conservation, ecosystem management, maintenance of the flora and fauna, protection of the wildlife, natural resources, and endangered species. And it has, if you talk about the environmental policies in India, it has undergone significant evolution over the period of time to address the complex challenges which has been posed by rapid industrialization, urbanization, and population growth. So if you talk about environmental policy, the importance of implementation of an eco energy oriented policy at a global level to address the issues of global warming and climate change, and preserving the flora and fauna, maintenance of biodiversity, it should be accentuated in such a manner that it should be effectively applicable throughout the nation. And policies concerning energy or regulation of toxic substances, including pesticides and many other types of industrial waste, as part as part of the environmental policy, should be incorporated in order to tackle these issues. And it can be deliberately taken to direct and oversee human activities which has been involved over the years, and which has brought a lot of damage to the continent, to the nation, or to the state, where there is illegal encroachment in the form of sometimes in the law in the form of illegal encroachment, cutting out trees and making pathways in the hilly areas. Even if you will see today, the hilly areas, they aren't anymore they aren't anymore hilly. It has, due to large scale development and due to the fact of tourism, they have been massive constructions of hotels, other infrastructure development which has been taking place, in which affects the environment and which further causes landslides or cloud burst and so on. So therefore, it could be said that the human activities are thereby, to some extent, or rather they are equally responsible, which to create a havoc or to disturb the equilibrium of the environment, and their efforts, or their concerted efforts, their coordinated efforts, can prevent harmful effects on the biophysical environment and natural resources, so that changes can be made on the part of the human beings to continue to think about, to deliberate on it, to take actions in order to preserve and protect the environment. The environmental policy, it focuses on problems arising from human impact on the environment, which retracts onto human society by having a negative impact on the human values, such as good health or clean and green environment. Environmental policy instruments are tools which has been used by the government to implement their environmental policies, to formulate and implement environmental policies. And the government make use number of types of instruments. For example, economic activity incentives and market based instruments such as taxes and tax exemption, tradable permits and fees, which can be very effective to encourage compliance with environmental policy. Bilateral agreements between the government and private firms, and commitments made by the firms independent of governmental requirements, are examples of voluntary environmental environmental measures. Another instrument would be is the implementation of greener public purchasing programs. So environmental policies particularly refers to any course action that is deliberately any course of action that is deliberately taken to manage human activities, to prevent or to mitigate harmful effects of the natural resources, the ecosystem or the nature. In general, the environment policy aims to ensure that man-made changes to the environment do not carry harmful effects on human beings or animal species. In fact, it aims, or rather it destroys or disturbs the equilibrium of the environment. The national for the government involvement in the environment is to protect the environment and to create a more conducive environment for all to survive. The National Foreign Policy 1988 and the amendments made in 2002. Now I will talk about the National Forest Policy of 1988 and the amendments made in 2002 in this policy. Forests often referred to as large number of as the lungs of our planet and play a very pivotal role in maintaining ecological balance, conserving biodiversity and supporting human livelihoods. So the National Forest Policy of 1988 India laid the foundation for the sustainable forest management, and subsequent amendments in 2002 reflected the evolving understanding of the intricate relationship between forests, communities and sustainable development. The principal aim of National Forest Policy of 1988 was to ensure environmental stability and maintenance of ecological balance, including atmospheric equilibrium, which were vital for the sustenance of the life forms, human, animal and planet. There are certain objectives of the forest policy of 1988. First of all, it was to maintain environmental stability through preservation and, if necessary, restoration of the ecological balance that the substantial depletion of the forest has negatively impacted. Secondly, to conserve the nation's natural heritage by preserving and protecting the remaining natural forests, which are home to a wide variety of flora and fauna that represent the country's incredible biological diversity and genetic resources. Thirdly, to check soil erosion and denudation in the catchment area of river, lakes and reservoirs to conserve soil and water, lessening floods and droughts, and delaying reservoir siltation, and then to assess the expansion of sand dunes in Rajasthan desert regions. Second, then to significantly increase the country's forest and tree tree cover through extensive afforestation and social forestry programs, particularly in all deforested, degraded and unproductive regions. Then to fulfill the needs of the rural and tribal people for fuel, food, fodder, minor forest produce and small timber, and then to boost forest productivity to satisfy the country's immediate needs, to promote effective wood substitution and efficient use of forest products, and then finally to mobilize a large-scale women-led people's movement to accomplish these goals and reduce the strain on already existing forest policies. Then there had been certain achievements which had been instrumental. If we talk about the national policy of 1988, it has several notable achievements in its mission to promote sustainable forest management and conservation. And some of these are conservation of forest. One of the primary achievements of the policy has been the conservation of forest cover in India. Secondly, biodiversity protection. The policy emphasizes on biodiversity conservation, which has led to various plant and animal species protection. Then community participation. The policy also recognizes the importance of involving local communities in forest management. Then afforestation and reforestation. The policy focuses on afforestation and reforestation efforts, which has expanded the forest areas. Then promotion of sustainable forestry practices by advocating sustainable forest management practices. The policy has contributed to the responsible utilization of forest resources. Then research and development. The policy has encouraged research and development in the field of forestry. Then protection of watersheds. Forest plays a very crucial role in maintaining watersheds and regulating water resources. Awareness and education. The policy has also, promoted awareness and education about the importance of forests and their conservation. And lastly, global recognition. India's commitment to forest conservation has been outlined in the National Forest Policy of 1988 and has received recognition on the international stage. The amendments made in 2002 and the collective impact on fostering resilient and vibrant forest are such, that is community forest management. The 2002 amendment placed a stronger emphasis on the community-based forest management, recognizing the traditional rights of forest dwelling communities. The amendment sought to empower local communities in decision-making process and benefit sharing. Secondly, biodiversity conservation. In response to increasing concerns about biodiversity loss, the amendments reinforced the commitment to biodiversity conservation, and the policy encourages the establishment of protected areas and corridors to enhance habitat connectivity. Sustainable harvesting. To ensure the sustainable utilization of forest resources, the amendments introduced guidelines for regulated and scientific harvesting. Balancing economic interest with ecological sustainability became a focal point of the revised policy. And then social forestry. The 2002 amendment reaffirmed the importance of social forestry programs to meet the demand for fuel, food, timber and other forest products, thus integrating social and environmental objectives. These programs aimed to alleviate pressure on natural forests. So the policy promoted social forestry on underutilized community land, and the government had to take certain technical assistance or provide certain technical assistance and initial financial assistance to establish such programs, and the benefits generated by social forestry were to be distributed to the community via panchayats. The policy also mentions farm forestry. So individual farmers were urged to cultivate tree crops for industrial and fodder purposes. Degraded, unused and unowned land were to be distributed to landless people via tree pattas. Then there was this environmental policy in India of 1992. The National Conservation Strategy and Policy Statement on Environment and Development 1922 was of the first attempts of the Government of India to develop a policy framework for environmental protection. The National Forest Policy 1988 and the Policy Statement for Abatement of Pollution 1992 are some other policy frameworks that advocate effective environment management at the national level. So the Ministry of Environment and Forest, Government of India in the same year 1992 announced this policy statement for the abatement of pollution, and the preamble not only spells out the objectives but also shift emphasis from defining the problem area towards the actual implementation for achieving the objectives. The diversity in environmental policies across countries is shaped by unique ecological context, economic priorities and historical perspectives. So developed nations often focuses on advanced technologies and stringent regulations to mitigate environmental impacts, while developing countries may balance environmental concerns with the imperative for economic growth. Notably, the implementation of these policies is a dynamic process. It is a dynamic process influenced by public will, political will, and public awareness and the effectiveness of institutional frameworks. The policy stresses on the need for a positive attitude on the part of everyone in the society to prevent pollution. Secondly, the need for a comprehensive approach to integrate environmental and economic aspects in developmental planning. Then preventive aspects of pollution abatement and promotion of technological inputs to be utilized to reduce industrial pollutants, and reliance upon the public cooperation in securing a clean environment to respond to the coming challenges. Then the integration of environmental considerations into decision making at all levels. The policy statement adopts the following fundamental guiding principles too, such as prevention of pollution at source, the adoption of the best available technology, the polluter pays principle, and the public participation in decision making. The policy aims at the overall objective of the policy is to integrate environmental consideration into decision making at all levels, and in order to achieve this broader objective or the overall objective, there are certain aim. The policy aims at prevention of pollution at source instead of the end of pipe treatment approach. Secondly, encouraging developing and applying the best available practicable technical solutions for pollution control and abatement. The norms will be revised to lay down mass-based standards which will set specific limits to encourage the minimization of waste, promote recycling and reuse of materials, as well as conservation of natural resources, particularly water. Assistance for adoption to clean technologies by small-scale industries. Then ensuring that the polluter pays for the pollution and control arrangements. The next one was focusing on the protection of the heavily polluted areas and river stretches by identifying critically polluted areas. Then next, while regulatory measures remain essential for the effectiveness of the policy, new approaches for considering market choices will be introduced. The aim is to give industries and consumers clear signals about the cost of using environmental and natural resources. Then annual statements will help in identifying and focusing attention on areas of concern, practices that need to be changed, and plans to deal with adverse effects. This will be extended to an environmental audit. Then resource accounting will be used to give an idea of how economic policies are affecting the environment. And then involvement of the public in decision making. Responsible non-governmental organizations and public spirited individuals can bring about significant pressure on polluting units for adopting abatement measures by through public litigations, public interest litigation, and this commitment and expertise will be encouraged and the practical work supported. Information about the environment will be published periodically. Then the new environmental policy came into existence in India in 2006. There was a revised version. Certain modifications were done to this new policy of 2006. The National Environment Policy is one of the India's commitment to clean environment for making a positive contribution to international efforts. Article 48A and 51A, 51AG of the Constitution are strengthened by judicial interpretation of Article 21, recognized that maintaining a healthy environment is every citizen's responsibility of the country, and the new environment policy of India was implemented in 2006. This policy sets a group of policy principles depending upon their relevance, feasibility in relation to cost, and technical and administrative aspects of their application. The principle under this policy includes sustainable development concerns, the right to development, environmental protection, the precautionary approach, economic efficiency, legal liability, and setting up of environmental standards. There are the certain important objectives of National Environmental Policy of 2006. First, conservation of critical environmental resources. To protect and conserve critical ecological ecosystems and resources and invaluable natural and man-made heritage, which are essential for life support, livelihood, economic growth, and a broad conception of human well-being. Then secondly, intergenerational equity, livelihood security for the poor. This is to ensure equitable access to environmental resources and quality for all sections of society, and in particular to ensure the poor communities which are most dependent on environmental resources for their livelihoods, goods and assured secure access to these resources. Then there is intergenerational equity, which ensures that there has to be judicious use of environmental resources so as to meet the needs and the aspirations of the future, of the present as well as of the future generations. Then intergeneration of environment concerns in economic and social development, which looks into the fact that one has to integrate environmental concerns into policies, plans, programs and projects for the economic and social development, and to maintain the equilibrium of the environment, preserving and protecting the flora and fauna, biodiversity, desertification, afforestation, deforestation, so on. Then efficiency environmental resource use, one has to make sure that there has to be an efficient use of environmental resources, in the sense that there should be reduction in their use per unit of economic support, economic output, and to minimize adverse environmental impacts of the development. Then there is environmental governance. If you talk about the environmental governance, it is to apply the principles of good governance, that is transparency, accountability, rationality, reduction in time and cost, participation and regulatory independence to the management and regulation of environmental forces or resources in usage. Then there is enhancement of resources for environmental conservation. This is to ensure higher resource flows comprising finance, technology, management skills, traditional knowledge and social capital for environmental conservation through mutually beneficial multi-stakeholder partnerships between local communities, public agencies and the academic communities, investors and multilateral and bilateral development partners. There are the certain principles of NEP 2006 which has to be followed, which has to be formulated, or rather which was formulated to guide the activities of different actors in relation to the policies. And these are human beings. Human beings are at the center of sustainable development concerns. It has to be seen that they are entitled, human beings, they are entitled to a healthy and protective life in harmony with nature. So the right to, so there has to be a concerted effort, or rather there has to be a harmonized relationship between human beings and the nature in order to ensure a productive lifestyle of both the human as well as the various species. Then the right to development must be fulfilled so as to be equitably meet development and environmental needs of the present as well as of the future generations. Then environmental protection is an integral part of the development process. It is but imperative that in order to ensure sustainable or to achieve sustainable development, environmental protection is of primary concern, and it constitutes an integral part of the development process and cannot be considered in isolation from it. So whenever developmental process has to initiated, or when you talk about sustainable development, it is equally important to understand the certain nuances or certain strategies or certain we have to take certain action plan in terms of protecting environment. So development process should be initiated, but not at the cost of destroying or depleting the natural resources or trying to destroy or disturb the equilibrium of the environment. Then the precautionary approach, where there are credible threats of serious or irreversible damage to key environmental resources, lack of full scientific certainty, it shall not be used as a reason, for postponing cost-effective measures to prevent environmental degradation or the damage done to the environment. Then economic efficiency in various public actions for environmental conservation, economic efficiency would be sought to be realized, and this principle requires that the services of environmental resources be given economic value, and such value to account equally with the economic values of the other goods and services. So analysis in the analysis of alternative course of action like polluter pays concept and efficiency of resource use may also be accomplished by the use of policy instruments that would create incentives to minimize wasteful use of wasteful use and consumption of natural resources. Then the principle of efficiency also applies, the principle of efficiency also applies to the issues of environmental governance by streamlining processes and procedures in order to minimize cost and delay. So, equability is there. Then entities with incomparable values justifies or rather focuses on the significant risk to human health, life and environmental life support system beside certain other unique natural and man-made entities which may impact the well-being broadly conceived of a large number of persons may be considered as incomparable, in that individuals or societies would not accept these risks for compensation in money or conventional goods and services. So, a conventional economic cost benefit calculus would not accordingly apply in their case, and such entities would have priority in allocation of societal resources for their conservation without consideration. Then we talk about equity. Human beings cannot be treated differently based on irrelevant differences between them. Equity in the context of this policy refers to both equity in entitlements to and participation of the relevant public in the process of decision making process, overuse of environmental resources. Each context in addition must be distinguished in terms of intergenerational equity relating to justice within societies and in particular providing space for the participation of underprivileged and intergenerational equity relations to justice between generations. Then there is this legal liability. The principle of legal liability can be viewed as an embodiment in legal doctrine of the polluter pays approach itself deriving from the principle of economic efficiency, and the following alternative approaches to civil liability may be applied. In a fault-based liability regime, a party is held liable if it breaches pre-existing legal duty, for example, an environmental standard. Strict liability imposes an obligation to compensate the victim of harm resulting from actions or failure to take action which may not necessarily constitute a breach of any law or duty of care. Then there is public trust doctrine. The state is not an absolute owner but a trustee of all natural resources which are by nature meant for public use and enjoyment, subject to reasonable conditions necessary to protect the legitimate interest of large number of people of a matters of strategic national interest. Then there is decentralization. Decentralization involves ceding or transfer of power from a central authority to the state and local authorities in order to empower public authorities having jurisdiction at the state level, at the spatial level, at which particular environmental issues are salient to address these issues. Then we talk about integration. Integration refers to the inclusion of environmental consideration in sector level policy making, and the integration of the social and natural sciences in environment related policy research, and the strengthening of relevant linkages among various agencies at the central, state and local self-government levels that are changed with the implementation of environmental policies. Then environmental standard setting. Environmental standards must reflect the economic and social developments situation in which they apply. Standards adopted in one society or context may have unacceptable economic and social cost if applied without discrimination in another society or context. Then setting environmental standards would involve several considerations, like risk to human health, risk to other environmental entities, technical feasibility, cost of compliance and strategic considerations. and strategic consideration. Then preventive action, if you talk about the preventive action which has to be taken, it is preferable to prevent environmental damage from occurring in the first place, rather than attempting to restore degraded environmental resources after the act has been done. So preventive measures, precautionary measures needs to be taken up in order to protect and safeguard the environmental species. Then there is environmental offsetting. This is a general obligation to protect threatened or endangered species and natural systems that are of special importance to sustaining life, providing livelihoods, or general well-being. If for exceptional reasons of overriding public interest, such as protection, cannot be provided in particular cases, then cost-effective offsetting measures must be taken by the proponents of the activity to restore as nearly as may be feasible the lost environmental services to the same public. So these were the certain principles which were taken under the National Environment Policy of 2006. I will stop here and I will continue in my next lecture.